Okay, so looks like it's recording. Hello everyone, I'm Georgia from Brunswick Bound, and today I'm joined by poet Rebecca Jessen to talk about her debut poetry collection, Ask Me About the Future. I'd like to acknowledge that this broadcast is taking place on unceded sovereign land. I'm on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and Bec is in Meanjin on the traditional lands of the Jagera and Turrbal peoples. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that to any First Nations people who are watching this broadcast. To introduce Bec, she is the award-winning author of verse novel Gap, which was published in 2014, and her work has also been published in many literary journals, just to name a few: Overland, Meanjin, Rabbit Poetry Journal, Going Down Swinging, Cordite Poetry Review. The list is very extensive. And Rebecca lives in Brisbane and grew up in southwestern Sydney. This collection, Ask Me About the Future, which you can see is a bit loved by me right now, is her debut poetry book that investigates queer utopia, that which is just beyond reach. It's an intimate, witty, devout, exceptionally crafted collection that explores everything from deep space to the deeply personal. It's a collection I wish I'd read in my late teens and early 20s, but I'm very glad to have read it now, and I'm even more grateful that I get to speak with the author of it. So thanks so much for joining me today, Bec.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
Yay, such an honor. To sort of kick things off, it'd be lovely if you would share a reading from your collection with us.
Absolutely. Might read two poems. I'll read a slightly longer one and then a short one. The first one I'll read is Vote Yes, and this is probably one of my favorite poems in the collection. It's a found poem that I wrote in 2017, around the time of the postal vote for marriage equality. At a time when we're getting a lot of stuff in our mailboxes and people door knocking and having a lot of opinions about queer people's rights and validity and all that kind of stuff. And I guess writing this poem for me was a way to counter some of that discourse that was occurring kind of around queer people's lives, but not necessarily with our opinions. So this is Vote Yes. We have arrived at the shouting dog stage of the debate. This is precisely the sort of crazed response you'd expect from a dog called Mac. Sport is sport. Let the people go to the football and do who they want to do. Let the people eat their pineapple on pizza. It's un-Australian not to. I mean, for heaven's sake, homegrown heroes are delicate little flowers. The stupid clown in Canberra has a lifelong ambition to headbutt a blizzard of red herrings. Meanwhile, Pauline Hanson claims, I'm not a sexual person, and now I've got trolls. It's quite strange. I'm really interested in what the mums of Australia have to say about the sordid sex lives of bugs and slugs. Women soften the message, but two mothers cannot fill the vacuum, and I'm tired of them pushing their bagless Dysons in our faces. Make no mistake, it's in the bag. It's okay to say no to pineapple and pizza, but the average punter won't care. They've been captured by the juicy fringe of the so-called tropical agenda. Meanwhile, a clutch of conservatives is pumping sewage into a debutante ball on the most sacred day of the year. Mate, it's tantamount to a frenzied zealot wearing Speedos. The love of pineapple is not equal, it's a sham. A pineapple is not a pina colada just because it wants to be. So if something like pineapple on pizza disturbs you, or makes you fear this whole thing is about something other than a good-humoured debate, led with un-Australian calm and restraint, enlist now to conduct a million robocalls and urge somebody to please think of the children. It's all nonsense. Of course, there are queer kids killing themselves in the suburbs while a bunch of straight white men sink tinnies on a Sunday night. But it's a long time, thank God, since gay people have been discriminated against.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thank you.
Love that one.
I will follow that up with a differently toned queer poem, which is about queer joy instead. This one is near the end of a collection. It's called Prepare to Merge. IKEA catalogues stack up on our share house tables. We are the stock photo of couple cooking. There's something dangerous in the domestic light of a Sunday morning. The look is classic. You in your thigh highs, me in blue 501s. A lightly greased girdle holds you from behind. I'm packing heat in the kitchen. We play house while your housemate is elsewhere. I keep my domestic past folded squarely in my back pocket. The TV loops on the home channel. We swoon in unison at 12-foot ceilings and marble countertops. You knock out every wall and everything tastes better, butter slicked. I turn on the gas, but the flame never catches.
Amazing. I do like the contrast. That one is a very, well, utopic kind of poem as well, isn't it?
Yeah, very much.
Kind of leads me into my first question as well, but I also just want to say it was beautifully read, so thank you.
Thank you so much.
I was kind of investigating kind of ideas around queer utopia, and it's such a broad subject and it's got so many interpretations, and so I want to ask you what queer utopia means to you specifically.
That's a great question. I think for me, having thought so much about this and even doing some research in this area, it keeps coming back to, I think, just this idea of the everyday, the domestic, the ordinary, the quotidian, just how we're living our lives every day, but flipped. Like for me, a queer utopia is like going clothes shopping, and the sections of the clothes shop are ungendered, and there's no kind of fear about going into the men's section or the women's section and that kind of thing. So just thinking about those small things that, like, if we took away some of those barriers, what our lives would look like, and things like feeling safe out in the world, feeling safe to walk home at night, like all of this stuff for me is a queer utopia. Feeling like I don't have to stop holding my girlfriend's hand in the street depending on where we are, that kind of thing. Like, so I think like sometimes utopia can seem like this far away idea, and what I kind of came to through writing this book was actually it's really rooted in the everyday, and what I yearn for is for my everyday just to look a little different, and to take away some of the fear that comes with being visibly queer out in public.
That's really gorgeous as well, because it's kind of, it is the everyday that makes up everything. And it's sort of interesting because one of my next questions is actually going to be around how you came to frame this collection in sort of a speculative or sci-fi kind of genre, which, and it does open up really like fantastically with this spaceship jettisoning towards robot David Bowie. It's wonderful. And so I guess when I was thinking of these questions, that this one is kind of like, does the idea of genre offer more scope for expressing queerness than realism does? But it's also, I guess, then with what you just said too, realism is the kind of fantastical there?
I guess like probably like maybe historically, definitely genre, especially novel writing, I guess has offered more scope for exploring, I guess, weirdness, for lack of a better word, otherness, any kind of difference that we don't see in our immediate world. And I think when I came across this idea of queer utopias, I first approached it like, okay, it has to be kind of sci-fi, spacey, like, because that's what you think utopia, and you think, somewhere far away and that kind of different world. And so I liked coming back to, I guess, that journey of like going to the far away and then coming back to the everyday in this book. And I think the utopia idea can be, you can play it out in other genres, but I like the idea of bringing it back to realism. And a lot of the book is autobiographical, so it's like, what does that look like in my life?
For sure. And it's still even though it's still got that realism to it, there's always mention of kind of that sort of more silver spaceship kind of sci-fi element that just kind of keeps coming back, which is really, really nice. Like, and I guess also it's a fun genre too, to play around with. Which kind of makes me want to jump to actually one of my kind of questions that some people might not know about when they pick up this book. But could you please tell us about the @askme_oracle on Twitter?
Yeah, for sure. I'm really glad you mentioned that. That was, I definitely have to give my girlfriend, fellow poet Zenobia Frost, a lot of credit for that, because she is the like technical brain behind the Twitter bot. It's kind of a co-creation in that I picked out a lot of lines from the book, and she has the technical brain to figure out how to make a Twitter bot. So she did the coding for the Twitter bot. And we sort of tinkered it along the way and added some stuff that wasn't in the book to kind of, I guess it's evolved a little bit after people, played with it and talked to it, and just altering those responses and like making it flirt with people, but like flirting and lesbian, like that kind of thing. So like if you would ask it about, I think, Carol the movie, it would, say Harold the lesbians, like just like inserting a lot of this like queer culture, that like just that kind of discourse. So definitely I didn't do, like, I wrote the book and I wrote the lines, but it was definitely my my girlfriend's kind of little pet project as a way to get some of the book out into the world. And it's like I love it. Like I love kind of seeing the weird lines it comes up with, and I feel like it's like the optimized version of me. Like it just has like every line is like just a little bit funnier than it is in the book, and like just a little bit more profound.
So it's like your digital oracle self, digital doppelganger happening or something.
Yeah, totally.
So can people just, if they've got Twitter, just tweet at it and with like a question about the future?
Yeah.
And the bot will produce an answer to give them guidance. Or
And there's like, I think there's like a few levels you can like, if you use the word future in your tweet, it will respond with a bit of wisdom. And there are like people have figured out ways to kind of keep the bot talking. So there are different kind of questions to ask, but it will keep producing answers.
Oh my gosh, it's like some kind of logic puzzle to So great. Well, thank you, and thank you, Zenobia, for bringing that into the world. I want to ask as well about form, because you've got a lot of different form that you experiment with in this collection, and it's super cool. You just mentioned before about Vote Yes and how it's a found poem, and just to explain for anyone who is not a poetry nerd, so a found poem is essentially like a literary equivalent of a collage, to my understanding. And if you want to expand on that, please do. But yeah, I wanted to know what attracts you to using that form. It's obviously really effective, but it's so fun going through the notes as well and referring back to where things came from. But yeah, what does it mean to you?
Yeah, I guess like I mentioned, like just before reading Vote Yes, I think a few different approaches to that form. One of them is, I guess, political, in that you can turn around a discourse that is happening around you that, you know, is about you but doesn't necessarily involve you. So I think like that, the found poem is such a great form to kind of, I guess, enter a conversation and to take back some of that power that's been taken away from people. And like, it's just really fun. Like the spaceship poem, which is called Go Farther in Lightness, like most of that is found material. And like, I got that from some really weird places. Like a lot of it, like on Google Maps, you can look at like the inside of the International Space Station.
Wow.
Which is like incredible. And like, I'm a space nerd, so I like love this stuff. And so you can like, and it has like all this text saying, like explaining all the different modules and pods in the space station. So some of the text in that poem is like from Google Maps. Like,
Wow.
I think like just like, and like before writing this book, I hadn't really experimented with found poetry. And I think in some ways it was a way into writing poems, and it was a way kind of away from feeling blocked, and also just a way to talk about things that I might not have necessarily talked about before, and just a different way to convey stuff, I think. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. It's really nice hearing the like kind of the why behind the poem as well. Similarly with form, there's another cool thing in this book, which is quite a few of the poems are sideways on the page, which is really great because, you know, I'm not sure if it was intentional in terms of like reorient your perspective or tilting like you're in a spaceship. Maybe I'm just getting too nerdy there. But yeah, how did that come to be?
That I can't take credit for that, unfortunately. That was very much just a constraint of the size of the book itself. And
Really?
yeah, because
Wow.
I think it was something like maybe 13 words across was like how many they could fit on a page if it was in portrait. And so I do have quite a few poems that, you know, sprawl across the page, so they had to be flipped, otherwise I would have had to completely, you know, rejig the form of them.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know, at first I wasn't sure about it, but like I've had quite a few people say to me like, oh, it kind of like made me more engaged with the book, or it's just like, you know, you can't just, I guess sometimes when you read and you can just read and read and read and you get to the end of a book, and like when the poems are flipped, like you have to be paying attention. You're like, oh, well, I have to turn around the page and actually, you know, absorb what I'm reading. So that's been a really nice like side effect of what was actually just a constraint with the printing.
It's so interesting. Yeah, and it definitely does like refresh your attention, sort of like, yeah, having to interact with the physical object that way too. That's so interesting. Wow, I thought it was like originally intentional. Cool.
I'm sorry, I can't take credit.
No, I think that's even better. Another thing that I sort of want to ask about was in the opening poem, which is just so powerful, so Self-Portrait 2017, it's like, it's so heart-wrenching. It really sets the tone for the whole book. And it's really like, you know, the words are very, very strongly carved out. And in the last couple of lines, you know, it's said, "I'm queer, I'm not yet here," which is, you know, that feeling of the horizon, utopia, reaching for it as well. And to that being out of reach. I guess, like, you know, this is a collection that spanned quite a few years, and there's been a lot of changes in terms of identity and politics and embodying queerness openly. Um, do you feel like since writing this collection that we're making progress, and that it's easier to self-determine one's queerness rather than, you know, I think there's reference to sort of an acceptable kind of queerness as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, I think like progress is being made, and I don't know if, you know, one of the major steps, you know, one of the first steps maybe was marriage equality.
Mm.
And I know there was a lot of different opinions around that in terms of, you know, this isn't like this, it doesn't end here. Like, it's like we can have this thing and it's sort of symbolic in that it makes us stop looking and seeming different from the rest of the population in terms of like, now we can get married too, but like, you know, our rights don't stop there, and there are still things that we don't have rights to, and there is still, you know, there's still all this violence against queer people in like so many multi-layered ways, like physical violence, and then, you know, just like really small microaggressions that people, you know, may just not even be aware of, like the things that queer people deal with every day. Like, you know, queer people still have to come out all the time. Like, you know, I'm 32, but I still come out every time I see a new medical professional, like that kind of thing. So I guess, like, you know, there are like little steps of progress being made, but yeah, I feel like with such a, it feels like a long way until we're, you know, until we're up here with where everyone else is.
Until utopia's reached, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
I also want to ask, I guess this is jumping back to form, just again because I'm nerding out, but the last poem of the collection, Your Daily Horoscope, could you talk about how that was created? Because from the notes I understood that to be generated by something on the internet, but I might leave you to explain it.
Yeah, totally. That was a fun one. And again, like another found poem. And it started as I visited a bunch of websites and took the like daily horoscopes for Aquarius, because that's my star sign, so of course. And then you know, just created a document with, you know, over 1,000 words of various daily horoscopes. And there's this incredible app that was created by Gregory Kahn and here Lindsay Bird, which is called Glass Leaves. And I only found out about this at a workshop with Hira a few years ago in Brisbane. And it's just been like the best tool. Like, I tell everyone about it. It's like, if you're stuck, put your, you know, I even put like my own original poems in there, and like, you can just like, it has all these functions where you can manipulate the text. And what I did with the horoscope poem was I took all that text that was in the document, put it into this app, and then one of the functions is that you can randomize the text. So I hit randomize, and then basically like cherry picked out my favorite phrases from what it had given me, and then, you know, built the poem from that. So it's like really, it's yeah, it's a really cool tool to just, I guess, like, even, you know, with your own words or someone else's words, just to shake up how you're looking at text.
That's so cool. It's kind of like a collaboration with a bot again as well.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I'm gonna have to give that a go, because I just love that it concludes in that way as well, and with also like a horoscope. It's just, it's really perfect and really fun.
Great.
Just a couple more questions. So thanks so much for these really incredible and really interesting answers as well. I was wondering, there's a lot of different influences that come out in this collection, but who or what are some of the primary ones that you sort of turned to originally, I guess?
I guess like for this collection in particular, definitely be late queer scholar Jose Munoz has been incredibly influential on this book, and I did my honours thesis on his text Cruising Utopia, so that's definitely where this book, like where that seed of an idea came from. And so I just like am eternally grateful for his words, because they've like just, he has such a like radical vision of queerness and what queer life can look like. And so I think like that's really the major one for this book. And then like when you look at the notes section, there are so many different, like music has always been such a big influence on my writing. And I guess looking in the book, you can get an idea of the kind of terrible taste in music that I have and the things that I reference.
Fantastic taste.
Yeah. Depending who you ask. I'm happy with my choices, but yeah, so I think like those two things, music and even just like the random, like this isn't any one person, but because there are a lot of found poems and like just the random stuff on the internet, like weird news headlines and like I guess like at the moment I've been collecting a lot of strange news clippings as well and trying to put those into poems, because we're getting so much news, and like I'm a anxious scroller of the news all day, and like how do I turn this into a poem? So I think like just taking weird phrases that you see on the internet is like for me a really big influence in my thinking and my writing.
And well, I guess the news headlines are becoming more and more outlandish as we get further along in this year.
Yes.
Yeah. I wanted to thank you as well, because you introduced me to, I had no idea the Royal Ballet had adapted Virginia Woolf.
Oh my God. Yes.
I was watching that last night and going, whoa, this is
it's incredible.
Yeah, wow. Really, really incredible. I think I'd gotten like a snippet of the Orlando part, and I was just like, this is a really interesting interpretation. So
yeah. You're welcome. I'm so glad.
Yeah. So those watching, there's a fantastic poem in this collection that is about that ballet and attending it. So thank you. And last but not least, and not to put any kind of pressure on you, because obviously we're, living through the plague and one does not need to be outputting all the time. But I was wondering what you're working on at the moment, or what's something on the horizon for you that you're excited about.
Yeah, I guess I'm doing my PhD at the moment. I just started this year, which seems like, what a year to start your PhD.
True.
So it's been interesting.
What are you doing your PhD on?
I'm looking at this idea of lesbian identity, and I guess sort of like following on from a lot of the themes in the book is I'm really interested in the digital sphere and then beside that lesbian identity and how we perform our identity on the internet. So looking at things like lesbian memes on Instagram and lots of lesbian TikTok and that kind of thing, and thinking like, how can I turn this into poetry, and how do we embody this identity and perform it and those kind of ideas. So that's like what I'm thinking and writing about at the moment.
Fantastic. That sounds awesome. Well, also congratulations on getting into a PhD and starting it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Fantastic. Well, that's pretty much concludes the questions. So thank you so much for joining Brunswick Bound and myself today, and providing amazing insight into this fantastic collection. I love it
you.
so much. I've been really nerding out about it for a couple of weeks. So happy that got to chat with you about it.
Me too. Thank you. I really appreciate your questions.
Thanks, Bec. All right, now I work out where the stop button is.